The airport was louder than usual that afternoon. Flight announcements echoed through the hall, luggage wheels scraped across the floor, and tired passengers filled every seat. It was one of those moments where everyone just wanted to reach their destination and be left alone. Near Gate 23, a tall man stood out from the crowd. He was easily 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tight jacket that showed years of hard training. His stance was confident, almost aggressive. Anyone who knew martial arts could tell immediately, this man was a fighter. A judo black belt, proud of his strength and reputation. He laughed loudly, making sure people around him could hear. Kung Fu, he scoffed. That stuff is useless in real life. Just fancy movements for movies. A few people chuckled nervously. Some nodded. Others pretended not to listen. The man continued, enjoying the attention. In a real fight, technique doesn't matter. Power does. One grab, one throw, fight over. His voice echoed through the terminal. That's when something changed. Across the waiting area, a calm figure slowly looked up from his seat. He wasn't tall. He wasn't loud. He wore simple clothes, no signs of wealth, no entourage, no bodyguards. Just a small travel bag resting by his feet. But there was something about him. Stillness. Focus. Control. His eyes met the judo fighters for just a second. Not with anger. Not with fear. But with quiet certainty. The fighter noticed the look and smirked. "What?" he said loudly. "You disagree?" The man stood up slowly. People nearby began to watch. There was a strange tension in the air now, like something unseen was about to happen. Even the background noise of the airport felt distant. The calm man stepped forward slightly and spoke in a low, steady voice. "Kung Fu is not useless." The judo fighter laughed again, louder than before. "Oh yeah. And who are you supposed to be?" The man didn't answer immediately. He simply adjusted his jacket and stood straight, balanced and relaxed, as if the ground itself supported him. A woman nearby whispered, "That guy. He looks familiar." Someone else leaned closer, trying to see his face clearly. The judo fighter shook his head in disbelief. "You're defending Kung Fu," he mocked. "Against me." The calm man finally spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper, but everyone heard it. 7 seconds, he said. "That's all it takes." The crowd went silent. And that was the moment no one realized yet. They were standing face to face with Bruce Lee. The moment Bruce Lee said, 7 seconds, the air around Gate 23 felt different. People who had been half asleep suddenly sat upright. Conversations faded. Even the constant airport noise, announcements, footsteps, rolling suitcases, seemed to soften, as if the place itself was listening. The judo fighter stared at Bruce Lee from head to toe. He smirked. 7 seconds. This small, calm man didn't look like a threat at all. The fighter laughed and crossed his arms. 7 seconds for what? He said loudly. To run away. A few people chuckled again, but this time it sounded forced. Something about Bruce Lee's calm confidence made the joke fall flat. Bruce didn't react. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't change his expression. He simply stood there, feet planted lightly, shoulders relaxed, breathing slow and controlled. To the untrained eye, it looked like nothing. To someone who understood combat, it looked like absolute readiness. The judo fighter took a step closer. "You know," he said, pointing at Bruce, "I've trained for years. National tournaments. Real fights. Real pain." He tapped his own chest proudly. "Judo works in reality. Throws. Locks. Ground control. Kung Fu." He shook his head. "Just cinema." Bruce tilted his head slightly, listening. Not interrupting. Not offended. A young man in the crowd whispered to his friend, "Why is he so calm?" Another replied, "Either he's crazy, or he knows something." The judo fighter paced in front of Bruce like a predator showing dominance. "You martial arts guys always talk about philosophy," he mocked. "Mind. Spirit. Balance." He stopped suddenly, standing inches away. "But when fists fly, all that disappears." Bruce finally spoke again. "Only if the mind is weak." That sentence landed harder than any insult. The judo fighter clenched his jaw. "Careful," he warned. "You're pushing it." Bruce smiled, not arrogantly, not sarcastically, but like a teacher watching a student who hadn't learned the lesson yet. "I'm not pushing anything," Bruce said softly. "I'm standing still." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Someone near the back raised a phone and started recording. Another followed. Then another. Security noticed but didn't intervene yet. No punches had been thrown. No rules broken. The judo fighter looked around, realizing he had an audience now. Good. He straightened his jacket. "All right," he said. "Let's make this simple." He pointed to the open space near the gate. "One move. No tricks. I grab you, fight's over." Bruce glanced around briefly, then nodded. "As you wish." Before we go any further, backhand index pointing right, like this video if you believe skill matters more than size. Backhand index pointing right, subscribe for more legendary martial arts stories. The judo fighter rolled his shoulders and loosened his arms. Years of training showed in his posture. Strong base. Confident grip. He was used to controlling bigger, stronger opponents. Bruce, on the other hand, looked almost fragile by comparison. Almost. A middle-aged man in the crowd whispered, "This won't end well for him." A woman replied quietly, "I don't know. Look at his eyes." Bruce's eyes were focused, but relaxed. No fear. No ego. Just awareness. The judo fighter stepped forward and stopped. "You still want to do this?" he asked. "You'll get hurt." Bruce met his gaze. "Pain," he said calmly, "is a great teacher." That was it. The challenge was set. The judo fighter bent his knees slightly, preparing to rush. His plan was simple: close the distance fast, grab Bruce's upper body, and slam him down with raw power. Easy. Bruce shifted his weight just a fraction. Barely noticeable. But it was enough. The crowd held its breath. No one knew it yet, but in the next moment, everything they believed about strength, size, and useless kung fu was about to collapse. Because those 7 seconds were about to begin. The moment stretched like time had slowed. The judo fighter lowered his center of gravity, muscles tense, eyes locked on Bruce Lee. Years of competition had trained him to explode forward without hesitation. He was confident that strength, size, and experience would end this in seconds. Bruce stood relaxed, hands loose at his sides, body angled slightly, not squared up like a street fighter, not rigid like a statue. To most people watching, it looked like poor defense. To Bruce, it was perfect balance. The judo fighter suddenly lunged. His right foot slammed forward, and his arms shot out, aiming for a powerful clinch around Bruce's shoulders. The crowd gasped. A few people flinched, already expecting to see Bruce thrown hard onto the cold airport floor. But what happened next didn't match their expectations. Bruce moved, not backward, not forward, but slightly to the side. It was subtle. Almost invisible. The judo fighter's grip closed on empty air. Before he could adjust, Bruce's hand lightly touched his wrist, not grabbing, not striking, just guiding. At the same time, Bruce shifted his hips and stepped inside the fighter's balance. The big man frowned. Something felt wrong. His weight, his greatest strength, suddenly felt heavy in the wrong direction. "What?" he muttered. In one smooth motion, Bruce rotated his forearm, applying pressure at just the right angle. The judo fighter felt a sharp jolt shoot up his arm. His grip weakened instinctively. Bruce stepped again. Not fast. Not slow. Precise. The judo fighter tried to recover, using brute force to pull Bruce in. But the harder he pulled, the more unstable he became, like tugging on a door that wasn't attached to the wall. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Someone whispered, "He's not even hitting him." Bruce shifted his weight once more and tapped a pressure point near the shoulder. Not a strike, just a controlled touch. The effect was immediate. The judo fighter's arm went numb. His knees buckled slightly as his balance collapsed. Bruce leaned in close and spoke quietly, so only the man could hear. "Power without control," he said, "defeats itself." The judo fighter tried to resist, but his own momentum betrayed him. Bruce redirected the force downward, guiding him, not slamming him, onto the floor. The impact was loud but controlled. The big man hit the ground on his back, stunned, staring up at the ceiling lights. The entire exchange had taken only moments. Someone near the front counted under their breath. 5, 6, 7. Exactly 7 seconds. The airport froze. No cheering. No laughter. Just silence. The judo fighter blinked, trying to process what had happened. He wasn't injured. He wasn't in pain. But something far worse had been shaken. His certainty. He sat up slowly, eyes wide, breathing heavy. "How?" he whispered. Bruce had already stepped back, giving him space. His posture was calm, respectful, no victory pose, no raised hands. People began murmuring all at once. "Did you see that? He barely touched him. That wasn't strength. That was control." Security guards finally approached, hands raised but unsure what to do. There had been no punches, no chaos, just a man on the floor and another standing calmly. One guard looked at the judo fighter. "Sir, are you all right?" The fighter nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off Bruce. "Yes," he said quietly. "I'm fine." He stood up, brushing dust from his jacket, his confidence gone, replaced by something else. Respect. He took a step toward Bruce, then stopped and bowed his head slightly. Not deeply. Not ceremoniously. But enough to show he understood. "I was wrong," he said. "I thought strength was everything." Bruce met his gaze, expression gentle. "Strength," Bruce replied, "is only useful when guided by awareness." The crowd finally exhaled. Phones lowered. Whispers softened. The tension that had filled the terminal moments earlier faded into disbelief and awe. A woman near the gate shook her head slowly. "I'll never look at martial arts the same way again." Bruce picked up his bag and adjusted the strap over his shoulder, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for everyone watching, something extraordinary had. Because in 7 seconds, one man's arrogance had been dismantled, not by force, but by understanding. And the lesson wasn't over yet. For several seconds after the judo fighter hit the floor, no one spoke. The airport, usually filled with constant movement and noise, felt strangely still. It was as if time itself had paused to absorb what everyone had just witnessed. The bright ceiling lights reflected off the polished floor, and in that reflection, people could see their own stunned expressions. The judo fighter stood there now, silent, no longer the loud, mocking man from moments earlier. His shoulders were still broad, his body still powerful, but his posture had changed. The arrogance that once radiated from him had been replaced by uncertainty. Not fear. Not anger. But understanding. He slowly rolled his wrist, testing the feeling that had faded only seconds ago. There was no pain, no injury. And that, more than anything, confused him. He looked at Bruce Lee. "You could have hurt me," he said quietly. "But you didn't." Bruce nodded slightly. "Harm was never the goal." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Around them, the crowd began to murmur again, this time with respect rather than excitement. People exchanged looks, some shaking their heads, others smiling in disbelief. A young man whispered, "That was beautiful." A woman nearby replied, "I didn't even see most of it." Security finally stepped closer, unsure how to handle the situation. "Gentlemen," one of the guards said carefully, "is there a problem here?" The judo fighter shook his head. "No," he replied. "There was a lesson." The guard glanced at Bruce, then at the small crowd forming around them. Seeing no danger, he nodded and stepped back, allowing the moment to resolve itself naturally. The judo fighter took a deep breath. "I've trained my whole life," he said, his voice no longer loud. "Competitions. Medals. Titles." He paused, searching for the right words. "But everything I learned was about forcing my will onto someone else." Bruce listened attentively, hands relaxed at his sides. "You showed me something different." Bruce spoke softly. "True martial arts," he said, "are not about defeating others. They are about understanding movement, energy, and yourself." The judo fighter absorbed the words slowly. I mocked Kung Fu, he admitted, because I didn't understand it. Bruce gave a faint smile. Most people mock what they fear, he said. And fear often comes from ignorance. That sentence hit deeper than the fall. A middle-aged traveler nearby nodded quietly, as if the words applied to more than just martial arts. The judo fighter straightened his posture, then bowed again, this time deeper and sincere. Thank you, he said, for the lesson. Bruce returned the bow, brief and respectful. Around them, a soft wave of applause broke out. Not loud, not dramatic, but genuine. People weren't cheering a fight. They were acknowledging wisdom. An announcement echoed through the terminal. Final boarding call for Flight 318. Bruce glanced toward the gate. His flight. He reached down, picked up his bag, and slung it over his shoulder. Before leaving, he turned back to the judo fighter one last time. Keep training, Bruce said. But train your mind as much as your body. The fighter nodded. I will. As Bruce walked toward the boarding line, people instinctively made space for him. Not out of fear, but respect. Some recognized him now. Whispers followed him. That's Bruce Lee. No way. I just saw that. Bruce didn't react. Fame had never interested him. Only growth. The judo fighter stood watching as Bruce disappeared down the jet bridge. The terminal slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed. Bags rolled again. Announcements continued. But something had changed. The fighter looked around at the people who had witnessed the moment. Then he looked at his own hands. For the first time in years, he realized that power without wisdom was incomplete. And that realization would stay with him long after the flight took off. The airport slowly returned to life, but for the judo fighter, everything felt different. People moved past him, pulling suitcases, checking boarding passes, laughing, complaining, living their normal lives. Yet inside his mind, the last few minutes replayed again and again, frame by frame. He had stepped forward with confidence. He had relied on strength. And in 7 seconds, everything he believed had been questioned. He sat down on one of the metal chairs near the gate, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor. His heart was still racing, not from fear, but from realization. I didn't lose, he whispered to himself. But I didn't win either. Across the terminal, 2 young men were excitedly talking. That was insane, one said. He didn't even throw a punch. The other nodded. That wasn't a fight. That was control. The judo fighter overheard them and closed his eyes briefly. For the first time in years, he wasn't angry about being talked about. He was thinking. A memory surfaced, his first day of training, years ago. His coach had told him, power makes you dangerous. Discipline makes you great. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten the second part. He stood up and walked toward a nearby coffee stand, his movements slower now, more deliberate. The barista glanced at him. Rough morning, she asked. He gave a faint smile. Enlightening, he replied. As he waited for his coffee, a middle-aged man approached him carefully. Excuse me, the man said. I saw what happened earlier. The fighter nodded, unsure what was coming next. That man, the traveler continued. He didn't humiliate you. He taught you. The words struck deep. Yes, the fighter said quietly. He did. The man smiled and walked away. The judo fighter took his coffee and returned to his seat. He looked around the terminal, seeing people differently now. Not as obstacles. Not as weak or strong. Just people. He realized something uncomfortable, but honest. If Bruce Lee had wanted to embarrass him, if he had wanted applause, if he had wanted to dominate, he could have. But he chose restraint. That restraint, more than the technique itself, was what shook him. At that moment, his phone buzzed. Messages were already coming in. Bro, someone uploaded a video. Is that you at the airport? Dude. Who was that guy? He didn't open them. Not yet. Because this moment wasn't about the internet. It wasn't about ego. It was about growth. Before we continue, thumbs up like this video if you believe true strength comes with humility. Speech balloon comment, respect, if discipline beats ego every time. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe for more legendary Bruce Lee style stories. A soft boarding announcement echoed again. The flight Bruce Lee had boarded was already taxiing away. The judo fighter felt a strange sense of gratitude and regret. I never even thanked him properly, he thought. But maybe he didn't need to. He stood up once more, this time straighter than before. Not puffed up. Not proud. Just balanced. As he walked toward his own gate, he made a silent promise. No more mocking what he didn't understand. No more confusing power with mastery. No more fighting just to prove something. He would train differently now. Not just throws and grips, but awareness, patience, and control. As he passed a reflective glass wall, he paused and looked at his own reflection. Same body. Same strength. Different mind. And somewhere high above the clouds, Bruce Lee sat quietly on his flight, unaware, or perhaps fully aware, that he had once again changed a life without seeking credit. Because that was his way. Not loud. Not forceful. Just precise. And the lesson continued to ripple outward, carried by every person who had witnessed those 7 unforgettable seconds. The days after the airport incident passed quietly, but inside the judo fighter's mind, nothing was quiet at all. Back home, he returned to his training gym, the same place where he had spent countless hours building strength, perfecting throws, and pushing his body to its limits. The familiar smell of sweat and rubber mats greeted him, just as it always had. The walls were lined with medals, certificates, and old photographs of victories frozen in time. Yet for the first time, those achievements felt incomplete. He dropped his bag by the bench and sat down slowly, staring at his hands. These hands had overpowered opponents, won matches, earned respect. And yet, in 7 seconds, they had been rendered useless, not by greater strength, but by greater understanding. His coach noticed immediately. "You're early today," the coach said, walking over. "And quiet." The fighter nodded. "I need to change how I train," he said. The coach raised an eyebrow. "Change? You're already one of the best." "That's the problem," the fighter replied. He stood up and stepped onto the mat, feeling the familiar surface beneath his feet. He closed his eyes briefly, recalling Bruce Lee's calm posture, the effortless movement, the absence of wasted energy. "I rely too much on force," he continued. "I want to learn control." The coach studied him carefully. He had seen many fighters over the years, some talented, some arrogant, some broken by defeat. But this was different. "What happened?" the coach asked. The fighter hesitated, then spoke honestly. "I met someone," he said. "Someone who showed me how little I understood." Training began, but it was different now. The fighter moved slower, more thoughtfully. Instead of rushing into grips, he focused on balance. Instead of overpowering his partner, he studied angles, timing, and weight transfer. At first, it felt wrong. Weak. His sparring partner frowned. "You okay? You're holding back." "No," the fighter said. "I'm learning." He began exploring concepts he had once ignored: breathing, posture, awareness. He watched how small shifts in stance changed everything. How tension created vulnerability. How calm created opportunity. Mistakes happened. He stumbled. He got thrown more than usual. But he didn't mind. For the first time in years, he felt like a student again. Late one evening, after everyone else had left, he stayed behind on the mat. The gym was quiet, lights dimmed. He practiced slow movements, visualizing the moment at the airport, how Bruce Lee had redirected force rather than meeting it head-on. "Be water," he murmured to himself. "Not rigid. Not resisting. Adapting." Weeks passed. The change became noticeable. During sparring, his movements were smoother. His reactions sharper. He used less effort but achieved more control. His partners began to comment. "You're different lately," one said. "Calmer." The fighter nodded. "I finally understand what training really means." Outside the gym, his behavior changed too. He listened more. He spoke less. The need to prove himself faded. Confidence replaced arrogance. One afternoon, a young trainee approached him nervously. "Sir," the boy said, Why do you always bow before practice? Even when no one is watching. The fighter smiled. Because respect, he replied, isn't for others. It's for yourself. That night, scrolling through his phone, he finally watched one of the airport videos. The clip ended just as Bruce Lee walked away, quiet and composed. The comments were filled with praise, shock, and arguments. But one comment stood out. Real power doesn't announce itself. He turned off the phone. He didn't need validation anymore. Somewhere, Bruce Lee had said, if you always put limits on everything you do, it will spread into your work and into your life. The fighter finally understood. The airport incident wasn't humiliation. It was a gift. A turning point. And though he might never see Bruce Lee again, the lesson would guide him for the rest of his life. Because true mastery doesn't come from winning battles. It comes from mastering yourself. Months passed after the airport incident, but the lesson born in those 7 seconds continued to grow, quietly, steadily, and deeply. The judo fighter was no longer the same man who once laughed at kung fu in a crowded terminal. His body was still strong, still disciplined, but his mindset had evolved. He trained with patience now, not impatience. With curiosity, not ego. And people noticed. At tournaments, he no longer rushed to dominate. He observed. He adapted. He conserved energy. Opponents often underestimated him, just as he had once underestimated Bruce Lee. And when he won, he bowed deeply. When he lost, he bowed just the same. One evening, after a long training session, he gathered a group of younger students around the mat. They had heard the airport story, whispered among themselves, unsure if it was true. One of them finally asked, "Sir, did you really meet Bruce Lee?" The fighter paused, then nodded. "Yes." The room went silent. Another student leaned forward. "Did he beat you?" The fighter smiled gently. "No," he said. "He taught me." That answer confused them, but also intrigued them. He sat down on the edge of the mat and spoke slowly. "I thought martial arts were about proving strength," he began. "About showing who's superior." He looked around at the young faces. But real martial arts are about removing fear, ego, and unnecessary violence. He remembered Bruce Lee's calm voice at the airport. "Kung Fu wasn't useless," he continued. "My understanding was." The students listened intently. "Size doesn't equal power," he said. "Noise doesn't equal confidence. And winning doesn't always mean defeating someone." The gym was quiet, but the lesson was loud. That night, as he locked up the gym, the fighter reflected on how a single moment, 7 seconds, had redirected the course of his life. He could have walked away angry. He could have blamed bad luck. He could have doubled down on arrogance. But he chose growth. Somewhere far away, Bruce Lee continued his journey, teaching, training, inspiring. Unaware of how many lives he changed without raising his voice or seeking attention. Because that was Bruce Lee's true legacy. Not just speed. Not just power. But awareness. Before we end, thumbs up like this video if you believe humility is the highest form of strength. Backhand index pointing right. Subscribe for more legendary martial arts and respect-based stories. Speech balloon comment below. Where are you watching from? I want to thank you personally. The fighter looked up at the gym mirror one last time before turning off the lights. He saw not a champion, not a black belt, but a student. And that made all the difference. Final message. Never mock what you don't understand. Never underestimate quiet confidence. And never forget, the strongest people in the room are often the calmest ones. Because true power doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is.